Hey, what's up, everybody? Sorry to be so up close. I'm actually sitting out here at the beach in the rain. Fortunately, I have a umbrella cover over me, but it's kind of coming down in spurts. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's not. But I'm just hanging out here, waiting for the rain to stop. But I was sitting here, just thinking about practicing and what I actually should be practicing. And what I typically tell my students is, especially if they're intermediate or beginner, long tones is a great way to build your tone. And I still believe in that. Definitely still believe in that. But I went on YouTube and I found two videos, two great tenor saxophone players, Chris Potter and Bob Berg. And they took a different approach to being able to practice, not just to build technical facility, but to build your mind. And a lot of times we don't think about the brain when we are practicing. We just go straight for being able to play high, fast, and loud, and applying all these techniques and patterns. But the brain is a very important part of that process. You really have to engage the brain in order to be able to perform at the level that you want to perform at. And one of the things Chris Potter had mentioned was just in his early days, and he does it now as well, is he actually put on records and just played along with the records and tried to pick out whatever he could pick out and grasp. Bob Berg, kind of the same thing. He was talking about in his early days when he was a kid, just getting started. His parents had this kind of small black and white portable TV, and it would always play these, all these show tunes. A lot of the sitcoms and things like that have jazz arrangers, and so he would sit there and just play along with those show themes and building that ear. And even me, when I was coming up, when I was in high school, I used to do this thing where I would sit down, in my room in the dark, and I would turn on the FM radio and just play along with whatever came on. And that allowed me to be able to build my ear. But going back to the brain, a lot of times we don't engage our brains enough. When you have a lick that you're playing and you really want to engage your brain to be able to, think on the spot, especially when you're at a gig, you have to do things, right? So if you take something you've been working on, that backwards and forwards, okay? You can play it very well, you can execute it very well, you can play it with, different dynamic nuances, embellishments, and things of that sort. Okay, that's good. Now, do that same line or that same lick or whatever it is, do it up a half step, and then do it again up a half step, then do it again up a half step, then do it again up a half step. And then split that, instead of doing half steps, do whole steps. And then instead of doing whole steps, do minor thirds, major thirds, your fourths, and take it, to that next level and use it. And that builds your mind and don't write it down, think about it and then execute it. And if you have a line, a simple line, think about playing it backwards. And that'll really mess your mind up, because you're gonna have to think about, okay, how do I play this? And then you'll play and figure it out backwards, okay? And then once you figure it out backwards, then maybe alternate, right? So you can play the first lick, the correct way, and then play the reverse lick, and then go back and forth, and then play that, up a half step, up a major second, up a minor third, And so these are things that you can do to actually start building your mind to really get you sharp. Another thing too is when you're looking at tunes and learning tunes, learn the harmony, right? And some people say, hey, you shouldn't memorize chords and things like that. I disagree. I think if you memorize the chord changes to a tune, that's fine. Of course, I did hear Chick Corea say, if you're thinking chord changes when you're soloing, like you're like seeing chord changes in your mind and you're thinking chord changes, you really don't know the tune. He said you really know the tune when you don't even have to, think chord changes. You're just kind of flowing, outside of that. But when you do that in your mind, and you have to get there. Basically what he was saying, you do these steps to start when you're learning the song, but you don't really know the song unless you can forget about chord changes, forget about, all the, referencing and just play the song. That's what Chick was getting at. But as you're learning, memorize the chord changes, and then instead of memorizing the chord changes, like literally memorize the harmony, right? And what I mean by that is instead of, E minor 7, A7, D minor 7, G7, instead of memorizing that, memorize the position, the 2-5, the Roman numeral, and where it comes, this may be a 3-6-2-5 or something like that in the song. Memorize that harmony, right? So whether it be like a 7-3-6, so let's say you have a F sharp minor 7 is the 7, a B dominant 7 is the 3, and then E minor 7 is the 6, and then A dominant 7 is the 2, and then you got G major. So I was challenging my brain now, just trying to explain that, but it gets your brain active and gets your brain, working. And that's the thing that we need to do. We need to be exercising our brains instead of, just exercising our fingers. Yeah, exercising your fingers is great. But the thing that you need to do is exercise your brain. Also, reading music. Reading music is a great way to exercise your brain. If you read music, start challenging yourself with, harder music. Sight read as much as you can, every day. If you don't read, I encourage you to learn how to read, because if you learn how to read, number one, you can open yourself up for more opportunities. But number two, you're exercising your brain. The brain is everything. You can't do anything without the brain. There are people that are deteriorating because they're not exercising the brain, so you got to get the brain active. And it hurts. God knows. I know it hurts sometimes to exercise your brain. You want to just do things that, feel good, that you don't have to think about, but if you want to be a serious musician or, in any field for that matter, you have to exercise your brain. The brain is very important and it controls everything. There's a lot of people that are suffering from dementia. They're perfectly healthy, in a physical sense, but they're suffering from dementia. A lot of times it could be hereditary, genes or whatnot, but as studies have shown, it could be slowed if you're doing activities that stimulate the brain. And also exercise is another way to do that. So this was more of a kind of, a healthy-ish post, but the key concept is, when you're practicing, make sure you are practicing and utilizing your brain to figure things out, because it'll help you when you're on a live show and you have to think sharp and on your feet. Also, when you're learning tunes, when you're learning a song, first learn the melody, then you can learn the chord changes, right? Also, be able to play the melody in different keys. Just when you learn the melody and you know it backwards and forwards in the original key, play it in different keys, right? And then start thinking about the harmony instead of you thinking the actual chords. I think a lot of people call it the Berkeley method, right? Where you, instead of thinking the actual chord changes, you're thinking the relative position of that chord to the song itself, to the key that you're in. So instead of thinking, like I said, instead of thinking your letters, you know, E minor 7 to A7 to D minor to G7, you're thinking of like, you know, 3, 6, 2, 5, you know, that type of thing relative to the original key of the song. And that would put you in a position to really be able to do a lot more, you know, musically, especially on the spot. And it also conditions your brain and hopefully, you know, keeps you sharp, you know, as you age and get older. So I just wanted to drop this, you know, on you guys. You know, hopefully it's something that, you know, you can take and experiment with and be consistent with. And I guarantee, you know, if you do that, you'll start seeing some major improvement and changes in your playing. You know, definitely, you know, some of the boring stuff is always, you know, important in tone development, playing long tones, understanding your overtone series, but also please make sure you take care of the brain. The brain has to be stimulated. We have to work the brain. And a lot of the things that you study when you're doing that will end up staying with you as you continue to grow. So this is L Train Jazz Studios. Just wanted to drop that to you. I hope it was something that could help, and then you know, pass it on if you can, and stay tuned for more helpful tips. Becoming a great musician, especially in jazz. All right, peace.